This video is brought to you by Squarespace. From custom domains to beautiful websites using their easily customizable templates that you can have up and running in minutes, e-commerce, email and email marketing, SEO, analytics, and scheduling, Squarespace does it all and has done it for us for the last 10 years. If you are a small to mid-sized business in any industry, Squarespace is the place to go for all of your website needs. Hop over to www.squarespace.com/hugh for a free trial. And if you like what you see and want to move forward, receive 10% off your first order by using the discount code HUGH at checkout. Thanks, Squarespace. Hey everybody, I'm Hugh Brownstone for Three Blind Men and an Elephant, and welcome to the latest episode in our occasional series entitled The Budget Gourmet. It has been a while. Today, we're talking Leica 35mm film M rangefinder cameras, and I will just cut to the chase. While there are good reasons why Leica's M6 may very well be the most popular used film M camera of all time, classic made in Germany build with full top plate engraving, built-in light meter, all the mod cons of the series, including the latest film advance and canted rewind levers, all the frame lines, the easier film loading system, more readily available servicing, I think the sweet spot in the entire pantheon of Leica rangefinder cameras, M and the earlier Barnack Leicas, is the, I'm surprised I'm saying this, completely manual, no battery, no built-in light meter M3. The M that started it all. Recently sold examples of single-stroke M3s, my personal preference, on eBay in near mint and or CLA condition, that is cleaned, lubricated, and adjusted because a rangefinder is a precision optomechanical device, have been going for between $1,700 and $2,000, double strokes for a little bit less. With this said, the one proviso for naming the M3 the sweet spot is if 50mm is your jam. Which one could argue it should be. The preferences of legendary street photographers like Joel Meyerowitz and Gary Winogrand for 35 and 28mm lenses respectively, notwithstanding. That's because the M was originally designed and optimized for 50mm, introduced and initially only available as an M3 kit with Leica's collapsible 50mm Summicron f2. The 50mm frame lines of the M3 basically go to the very edge of the viewfinder. The only other frame lines on it are of necessity for the narrower fields of view 90mm and 135mm. The thing of it is, the M3 sports the largest rangefinder patch with the highest magnification at 0.91x of any M. The modern standard M viewfinder comes in at 0.72x, and combined with the physical rangefinder base length of 68.5mm, the M3 offers the longest effective rangefinder base length in M history at 62.3mm. This is what makes it the most accurate and precisely focusing M of all time, better and easier than any other for focusing not just a 50mm lens, but the most demanding Leica lenses across the board through the ages, including the Noctilux M50, sure, but others as well, like the Noctilux M75 f1.25 and Summilux M90mm f1.5. Although the 0.85x variants of the M6 and M7 get close, hold that thought. Why single stroke instead of the earlier double stroke? Personal preference, as I said. Advancing to the next frame is a once-and-done affair with a single wind of the film advance lever rather than two. And I just like it. Really, that's it. That's all I can think of. Still, if you prefer the earlier double-stroke M3, you could save a couple of $100 in the process. If you are interested in the M as a collector rather than as a photographer, not that one cannot be both, well, double stroke is where it's at. The most expensive M3 ever sold was a double stroke, 3.36 million euros, including buyer's premium. As of recording, the highest price ever paid at auction for a single stroke M3 was just north of €500,000. Certainly not chump change, a first batch black paint edition at that. Not too shabby. So, a single-stroke M3, any M3, ain't exactly cheap, especially for a manual focus only, completely manual camera introduced in the middle of the last century, but of course it's all relative. By Leica M standards, a plain Jane M3 is a steal. When you find a really good one, It feels pretty much to this day as it would have straight from the factory back in the day. I know, because I own one. This one, a mint 1959 single stroke paired with my 5th generation non-aspherical Summicron 50mm f2. I paid $2,000 for the camera, $1,500 for the lens years ago. Today, the average price for recently sold M3s on eBay, I'm talking combined single and double stroke now in excellent condition, one rung below near mint, is still $1,600. But what about the other M's? Setting aside limited editions, special paint editions, or noteworthy one-offs, let's get into it. Although, in order to do that, we need a bit of context first. The M3 was a critically important launch for the company when it arrived in 1954. There was no M1 or M2 at that point. The post-war period saw a flood of Barnack Leica knockoffs from Canon, Nikon, Leotax, Reed, Fed, Zorky, and Nikon, but SLRs were already on the horizon. All the way back to 1936, the Kina Exacta was the first production 35mm SLR. The 1949 Zeiss Icon Contax S was the first SLR to use a pentaprism. The 1952 Asahi Flex was the first Japanese SLR, although it relied on a waist-level finder. And then, not long after the M launched, Asahi introduced the first commercially successful SLR with their 1957 pentaprism-equipped Pentax. Just 2 years later, the Nikon F would arrive to quickly become the standard for professionals. So, the M really was a do-or-die model for the company. Put differently, the M3 had to be, and was, so thoroughly considered, so beautifully designed, built, and executed, so wonderful in hand, such a quantum leap forward from the Barnack-era Leicas, that it became the game-changer of all game-changers after the Leica I of 1925. It was such a revelation that it has hardly changed over the last 71 years. Of all Leica cameras, it can be argued that this is also the model, the M3, most likely to last as close to forever as any camera can, overbuilt like the Brooklyn Bridge, no shortcuts anywhere. Although, right, it didn't have a built-in meter. We'll come back to that. Few cameras then did. Which brings us to the M2, introduced 3 years after the M3 as a more accessibly priced entry point into the M system. Great idea, but the M2 was a decontented M3, and Leica met its lower price goal by making material changes. The company swapped out the M3's big and beautiful integrated viewfinder for a smaller 0.72x model that one could assert was inferior. Swapped out the M3's beautiful automatic frame counter for a mundane manual one, and lost the M3's 135mm frame lines in the process. Still no meter either. The M2 was, however, the first M to have 35mm frame lines, which was the primary benefit of the lower magnification finder. Even with this advantage, M2s generally sell for less than M3s. Some of the magic was lost, and there are better options if 35mm is your focal length of choice. If you can cough up the extra dosh, I'd rather steer you to the next camera in the M lineup, the M4 introduced in 1966. That's because the M4 is an upgraded M3, but with 35mm frame lines as well. The good news? It puts back the automatic frame counter of the M3, and it introduces the canted rewind crank, updated film loading system, and new advance lever that would continue as is all the way up to the present day. The less good news? The M4 continued with the lower magnification finder and smaller rangefinder patch of the M2, once again the trade-off necessary to get the 35mm frame line set. Recently sold used M4s in excellent condition have been going for about $450 more than same condition M3s. You could think of the $450 as a tax for 35mm frame lines, but that's really kind of silly. You do really get some nice upgrades with it, and what you need if you want to shoot 35, like Joel Meyerowitz does. Although again, no built-in meter. Now, you could go for the M5 instead, introduced in 1971. It does have 35mm frame lines, not 28, and it is the very first M to sport onboard TTL through the lens metering. But the M5 was a very different beast. It remains a bigger, heavier, redesigned camera with a new manual of arms, including a more easily manipulable shutter speed dial relocated concentrically with the advanced lever, and dual strap attachment points on the right side of the camera. But apparently it was a bridge too far. Not well received in the market, production stopped after just 4 years. Still, recently sold M5s in excellent condition are averaging $1,800, just $200 more than an M3, about $200 less than any M4, $1,400 less than an M6, and $2,400 less than an M7. But if you can afford to do so, I'd skip it. Then again, if metering is your thing, you can't typically get into a Leica M with built-in meter for less. As for the other no wider than 35mm frameline options, the M4-2 was introduced 2 years after the M5, but I'd skip that one too. It was to the M4 what the M2 was to the M3. Essentially a decontented M4 with compromises required again to reduce the price. It lost the self-timer of the M4, not a big deal in my book, but it also lost the beautiful top plate engraving of the M4, M2, and M3, to which I can only say, ouch. To my eye, not that it matters, but that painted on Leica word mark looks garish, a bit like a handbag with little LVs all over it. Again, it no longer felt quite as premium, and if it matters to you, it was not made in Germany, but in Canada. The most important cost-driven functional downgrade in the M4-2, however, was the finder-introduced mid-cycle. This change brought with it the unintended consequence of flaring of the rangefinder patch that could white it out altogether in off-axis bright light. I experienced this multiple times for myself with an M6, and flaring issues apparently may have continued into early runs of M7 production. Leica eventually sorted the issue by replacing the rangefinder module with one that, if I understand this correctly, reintroduced a condenser lens and in later service updates, multi-coded external viewfinder windows. This is often called the MP fix because this set of updates was first introduced on the MP model launched in 2003. The good news here is that the MP fix can be applied to M4-2s, M4-Ps, M6s, and older M7s that need it for hundreds rather than thousands of dollars by Leica or, I believe, reputable third-party repair services like Dan Goldberg at DAG. A mid-cycle upgrade to the MP finder in later M7s obviated the need for the MP fix at all. And while the M5 doesn't suffer flare quite as badly as the rest, it couldn't take the MP fix because it's a fundamentally different camera. By the way, the introduction of a hot shoe on the M4-2 and motor drive compatibility really don't offset, for me, the M4-2 downgrades. But hey, different strokes for different folks. It's all good. Now, if you want to shoot with a 28mm lens and have those 28mm frame lines, you won't find them until the 1980s era, also made in Canada, M4-P. In spite of it being made in Canada, I think it's the best value for 28mm frameline M's. It's currently selling on eBay for about $1,000 less than comparable M6s. Nice touch? While they were at it, Canada added 75mm frame lines as well. You will want to find one which already has the MP fix or be prepared to pony up for one, but it still doesn't have quite the made in Germany feel. I don't know why recently sold examples in excellent condition are selling on average for about $100 less on eBay than the earlier M4-2. This was the last of the non-metered M's until we get to the MA, introduced in 2014. In between, we have the M6 and M7, so what about them? The classic M6, basically an upgraded M4 with built-in meter, was introduced in 1984, superseded by the TTL flash version in 2002. We've already talked about the rangefinder patch flaring issue, but as I said at the beginning, there are good reasons why the M6 is Yeah, I believe so. The most popular used M of all. Popular enough that Leica brought out a reissue in 2022 when I had the chance to get into the details with my friend and Leica's head of global marketing, Andrea Pacella. I'll put a link down to it in the show notes below. The reissue has the MP viewfinder, so flaring is taken care of. Put differently than I did a moment ago, the M6 is to the M4 what the M4 is to the M3. That is still reliant on a mechanical shutter, but upgraded with 28 and 75mm frame lines and the aforementioned built-in light meter that is better executed than the one in the M5. The other big difference between the M4 and M6 is the option of alternative viewfinder magnifications beyond what had become the standard 0.72x. A 0.85x viewfinder, first available in 1998 for the M6 Classic, to make it better than all but the M3 for focusing the most demanding lenses at the expense of the 28mm frame lines. Or B, a 0.58x viewfinder added in 2000 for the M6 TTL, as in TTL flash, for wider lenses and for eyeglass wearers. The M6 does require a battery for the meter, but that's it. Almost makes you want to have two M bodies, one for 50mm and up with the 0.85x, the other for 35 and down with the 0.72 or 0.58. So why isn't the M6 my pick for sweet spot among all film M's? It's the $1,400 price premium over the M3 for those additional frame lines and an internal meter with which I've never bonded, as well as the fact that I don't use a 28mm except on the Q3. For my M11, I go straight to the 24mm LMAR and 21mm Super LMAR, for which, in the case of my M3 or any other film M, I'd have to go to an auxiliary finder anyway. Why don't I like the built-in meters? What is it about the film M meters? It's the absence of real-time data beyond a red dot and either an arrow or plus or minus on either side of it. There is no information in the finder to help me make rapid trade-off decisions between shutter speed and aperture without removing my eye from the finder to look at the camera and lens, and that slows me down. This will never change sufficiently until Leica creates M lenses and M bodies with electrical contacts so that the aperture is not a guess, but a certainty. Which, once more with feeling, may not matter to you at all. But it is interesting, isn't it? The M7 superseded the M6 series in 2002. It's essentially an M6 offering aperture priority auto exposure, the larger shutter speed dial of the M6 TTL, which I do prefer, and an electronically controlled shutter. This meaning two things. A, stepless shutter speeds, that is more fine-grained exposure control for the aperture priority auto exposure mode, and B, unlike the all-mechanical M6 or any other mechanical M, just two shutter speeds operable should the battery die or become unavailable, 1/60th of a second and 1/125th of a second. Not optimal. This is yet another reason why many consider an M6 the better long-term purchase. The thing of it is, M7 prices have risen quite a bit lately. Excellent condition M7s have sold recently on eBay for about $4,200 on average. At this price point, we're only a couple of grand short of a brand new factory warranted M6 reissue, MP or MA, all in the neighborhood of $6,500. The MP, introduced in 2003 and still in production, is essentially an M3 body with original advance and rewind switchgear, with a light meter and the 0.72x viewfinder of the M6 upgraded to resolve the flaring rangefinder patch. This makes it a more versatile M3 with all three frameline pairs of the M6 available, 2890, 35-135, and 50-75. But like the M6 and M7, it is also available with either the 0.58 or 0.85x viewfinders with frame lines to match. The MA, introduced in 2014, is basically an MP without a built-in meter. But you know what? At that point, you could pick up a used 24-megapixel M10 in mint condition somewhere between a used M7 and a new M6 MP or MA, call it in the neighborhood of $5,500. But now with the advantages of digital workflow, including a rear screen and optional EVF to help with focusing, and you can have shutter priority or aperture priority in a digital M. All of which leaves us where precisely? I'll sum it up this way. For the modern photographer, any photographer, all M's are far easier to use than the Barnack Leicas. It is also the case that the M lens ecosystem is wider, deeper, and optically superior to the screw mount ecosystem, and one is more likely to be able to service or repair an M. The signature advance of the very first M, the M3, over the Barnack Leicas, M stood for Messucher, German for rangefinder, was the dramatically larger and brighter viewfinder with, for the very first time, an integrated rangefinder patch. Until that point, Leica shooters had to look through two separate windows, one for focusing and one for composition. The M3 viewfinder also introduced parallax correcting frame lines for each focal length, which moved inside the viewfinder seamlessly as one changes focus to help more precisely frame a shot. Not just for 50 millimeters, but for whatever lens one chose to attach to it. Not as satisfying for framing for most of us compared to using a 35mm SLR with microprism or even split rangefinder, but a Leica milestone nonetheless. And I can tell you, because more than half a century after I took apart my mother's Barnack Era 3A, just recently hand-delivering it to Leica Wetzlar, where Leica customer care was able to put it back together, and shocked to discover when I was finally able to use it in anger, how difficult it was to use those small dim windows to focus and compose a shot. Not fun. Compared with other operational advances over the Barnack Leicas, a film transport lever instead of a knob, a beautifully windowed automatic frame counter rather than a manual and relatively pedestrian one located concentrically around that knob, a hinged rear cover to make film loading easier, and build quality that was astonishing in comparison to the already astonishing Barnack series, the M3 was revelatory. For different reasons, the latest M's, including digital, are still revelatory, even today. When it comes to film M's, as I said at the beginning, I think the M3 is the sweet spot if you want to stay, and I'll change the vector here, truest to the original M experience, and you want greatest bang for the buck. But this also means you'll appreciate it most if you are a 50mm shooter, because the M3 was designed at launch specifically for the 50. But it is also the case that the build quality of the original M is phenomenal. It is every bit as beautiful to look at, every bit as satisfying in hand as any of the later models. It had to be a success, and like the Brooklyn Bridge, it was overbuilt, properly cared for. M3s just might outlast the Brooklyn Bridge. The single biggest functional shortcoming of the M3 compared to the newer M5, M6, M7, still in production MA and recent M6 reissue, for most of us, is the lack of a built-in light meter. But I have never bonded with the Leica's built-in meters, film or digital. As I said, their displays are too simple for what and how I shoot, showing only whether the scene is under, over, or properly exposed. Given the limitation of these built-in meters, there are other ways to skin the metering cat. Which matters greatly to me because, fourth, used M3s are somewhere between less expensive and dramatically less expensive than other M's, save for the decontented version of it introduced 3 years later, the M2. M3s are significantly less expensive than M6s and M7s. Add my favorite light meter for any non-metered film M, the M meter by Kex. Hold that thought too for another video. and the M3 is still a steal. But what and how I shoot might well have nothing to do with what and how you shoot, so let's summarize the alternatives. If you're a 35mm shooter and don't care about a built-in light meter, I'd skip the M2, M4, and M5 and direct you instead to the first M4. If you are a 28mm shooter, I'd first look closely at the M4-P, but I'd be sure to check to see if the viewfinder has received the MP fix or set aside budget and time for it. If you insist upon meter-equipped Ms, I understand. Still, we're talking notably more money than for an M3, M4, or M4-P, with used M7s averaging in the mid-4s reaching into 6K territory where the reissue M6, MA, and MP live. But at that point, I'd suggest you think long and hard about jumping the chasm and going used digital instead, beginning with the excellent plain Jane 24-megapixel Leica M10. I'd recommend that you continue to look long and hard at the M10 series too. An M10, an M10P, an M10R, an M10D will simply give you technically superior image quality, equal or superior manual focus, and deliver the other advantages of digital workflow without surrendering the Leica M experience. Now, there's so much more we could talk about. The advantages of film Ms, proven, for example, to be quieter and 1 or 2 stops more stable than film-era SLRs, courtesy of their smaller mass and the absence of mirror slap. No IBIS to get those advantages. The disadvantages of film Ms, from relatively slow top shutter speeds to the things Ms don't do well as film SLRs, never mind mirrorless cameras, even if we've touched upon them. Yet another video for another time, but don't let any of this stop you from exploring fully what it's like shooting with a film M, because in the right hands, under the right set of circumstances, with the right mindset, especially with the latest film emulsions that 1950s film era photographers couldn't dream of, from Kodak's T-Max 3200 to Leica's recently announced and incredibly fine-grained Monopan 50, among others. Even better, with the recent interest in automated home film developing, because it takes forever when you mail it in these days, film M cameras with their tiny, jewel-like lenses become some magical elixir of small size, lightweight unobtrusiveness, inspiration, talisman, and mechanical ecstasy. Just saying. This video is brought to you by Squarespace. From custom domains to beautiful websites using their easily customizable templates that you can have up and running in minutes, e-commerce, email and email marketing, SEO, analytics, and scheduling, Squarespace does it all and has done it for us for the last 10 years. If you are a small to mid-sized business in any industry, Squarespace is the place to go for all of your website needs. Hop over to www.squarespace.com/hugh for a free trial. And if you like what you see and want to move forward, receive 10% off your first order by using the discount code HUGH at checkout. Thanks, Squarespace. If you like what you've seen here today, please give a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, join the conversation in the comment section below, because this is an exceptional audience. If you'd like help with a portfolio review, gear selection, finding or honing your artistic voice, sign up for a one-on-one mentoring video call via Zoom at 3bmep.com/booking. Finally, please consider supporting our work by using the no-cost-to-you affiliate links down below, sending us coffee money via PayPal, or most especially, joining us on Patreon, links down below as well. However you choose to support us, as always, we thank you for it.